This is Fat Tony. Real name, Marion Anthony D'Amico. He is the boss of the Springfield Mafia. He has enacted numerous criminal operations over the years. These include stealing cigarettes, gambling, smuggling alcohol and fireworks, bribery, fraud, prostitution, and fixing sporting events. Plus a whole bunch of murders, attempted murders, and general kidnapping. You know, that kind of thing. His known associates are Legs, Louie, and Johnny Tightlips, among others. Fat Tony is a widower and has one son named Michael. Unfortunately, his lifestyle eventually caught up to him, as he died in season 22 of a heart attack. He was quickly replaced by his cousin Fit Tony. Fit Tony became Fat Tony again, and that version eventually married Selma Bouvier, which is probably a fate worse than death. This is the history of Fat Tony. Fat Tony is your friendly neighborhood mobster. He brings a ray of sunshine to every murder he commits. Okay, maybe that's not exactly true, but he's a very interesting figure written into a comedy like The Simpsons. Obviously, the stuff around him is gonna get pretty grim. Waste management tends to get a little dirty. But he has always been portrayed in an offbeat way, adding that layer of silliness to help smooth over some of the, horrific acts. Also, he's a good excuse to do a lot of Godfather, Goodfellas, and Sopranos parodies. I mean, come on. When else are you gonna do them? Okay, fine, this show loves The Godfather. But he's still a good opportunity to do these direct references and look at the seedy underbelly of Springfield. As always, we'll go back to the beginning and see where the character started. Fat Tony's first appearance was in Season 3's Bart the Murderer, when Bart gets a job at the Legitimate Businessman's Social Club. Things start out pretty tame with the criminal activities, mostly just gambling, stealing cigarettes, things mostly done off screen. We get the sense that there's a lot of serious stuff going on, but being told through the POV of Bart, it focuses more on the silly and mundane day-to-day stuff. This is going to be a huge theme with these characters, these down-to-earth mobsters. We start seeing the writers play with our expectations and portray Fat Tony as being weirdly agreeable at times. This is Fat Tony's only speaking role in seasons 3 through 5. He was initially just a guest star for Joe Mantegna, and it's clear that the show didn't know if it wanted him to be a regular. They used generic mafia guys in other shows, like this guy in Home Alone, or this one in Treehouse of Horror 3. Even when Joe Mantegna returns to the role, he only appears in about 1 or 2 episodes per season. Joe Mantegna is expensive. He has voiced him in every single role except for one, Season 7's A Fish Called Selma. They had Phil Hartman come in to do the sleeps with the fishes joke. It's very noticeable if you're listening for it. Since then, Mantegna has advised the show that he'll come in and record everything Fat Tony does. He loves the character that much. Fat Tony's second speaking role isn't until Season 6's Homie the Clown, in which Krusty racks up a huge gambling debt of $48. This episode is a little more direct with the violence and the threats, playing up how ridiculous and incompetent they are at their work. Come on guys, you gotta bring more than 3 bullets. Here's where we really get that juxtaposition of actually showing a serious situation, but in the most silly way possible. They also continue to write small glimpses of sensitivity into Fat Tony, with him telling Louie, "Listen to your heart," when asked for advice. The first 10 seasons are all excellent in how they build a sort of hilarious naivete or shame into Fat Tony. Some of this is obviously a put-on, like him playing dumb with the cops asking, "What's a murder?" and then concedes to Bart at the end of the episode that, yeah, he's right about crime not paying. In the pretzel episode in Season 8, he comes to Homer asking for a favor, and Homer shames him for it. "Oh, Fat Tony." To which Fat Tony meekly replies, "Okay, I will go." In the Prohibition episode, he literally asks Rex Banner how he can know whether he likes taking bribes unless he tries it. In Season 10, he bribes Mayor Quimby and starts a rat milking operation. When caught, he plaintively wonders, "I don't get it. Everyone likes rats, but they don't want to drink the rat's milk?" They build this sort of argumentative quality into Fat Tony, where he'll do something and then question afterwards, "Oh, really? That's a crime? That's surprising." At the end of that same Season 10 episode, when he beats up Mayor Quimby, Homer once again shames him, to which Fat Tony replies, "What? What did I do? Really, when you think about it, crime is just one big misunderstanding, right? After season 10, the writers went through a phase of giving Fat Tony slightly more ridiculous crimes. Prior to this, the jokes were mostly in the trappings of the crime or the execution itself. Now we get stuff like them building school ramps out of dried breadsticks in season 11, smuggling fireworks in season 12, passing ferrets off as poodles in season 13. He's still portrayed as a threat, someone you really don't want to mess with. It's just the crimes themselves become part of the joke. This is around where both Johnny Tightlips and Frankie the Squealer started to show up regularly. It's weird thinking of there being specific eras of Fat Tony jokes, but they really did go through trends with him. Seasons 13 and 14 were fond about jokes about his emotionality, poking at his masculine facade. At the end of season 13's Papa Got a Brand New Badge, Marge lists off his broken dreams as an Italian American, like Pizza Man, Leaning Tower Maker, or Organ Grinder, and Fat Tony breaks down into tears. In season 14, he insists on always watching the divine secrets of the Ya-Ya sisterhood, proclaiming tearfully, "Why was I born a man?" Then in the season finale, when Moe explains how Maggie changed his life for the better, Fat Tony and the other mobsters weep uncontrollably. These jokes might feel a little cheap, like LOL he's crying, but mobsters do tend to have this macho air about them, that expressing sadness shows weakness. Fat Tony is a little like Nelson in some ways, and how much the writers like to poke fun at that threatening and antisocial facade. This is probably a good place to step back and look at the overall continuity of Fat Tony as a character. The later seasons really started looking at his personal backstory. And would you believe that Fat Tony has one of the most tight and consistent continuities in Simpsons history? No, really, I'm not kidding. The writers stuck to their backstory for once. The only major inconsistency is over his name. In season 3, he was introduced as William Fat Tony Williams, and then in season 8, they announced him with the name we all know, Anthony Fat Tony D'Amico. You could argue in universe that maybe his first name was a pseudonym for criminal activities. I think the writers just changed their minds. In season 12, Frankie the Squealer blabs that Fat Tony's real first name is Marion. Now, they haven't really referenced that factoid again, but sure, we'll throw that into the pile. Season 16 has one of the weirdest bits of foreshadowing I have ever seen in this series. At the end of The 7-Beer Snitch, Fat Tony is about to kill Homer for ratting him out. He recognizes Marge as that nice lady who drives his son Michael home from school sometimes. Then, 2 whole seasons later, they do the episode The Mook, the Chef, the Wife, and Her Homer. An episode in which Marge carpools around all the kids, including Michael D'Amico, who we meet for the first time. This is incredibly strange for The Simpsons to do, especially 2 whole seasons apart. This is a show that doesn't care about continuity. They rarely ever deliberately set up anything in advance. It's not like the 2 episodes were in production at the same time. I think we have to chalk this one up to Bill Odenkirk, who happened to be the writer of both of these episodes. Don't know how much it was planned on his part beforehand. Either way, it was a clever bit of attention to detail with Fat Tony's family. As you can probably tell with his name and his Al Pacino-esque design, this whole episode was a huge Godfather parody, complete with the door joke at the end. Here's where we also learn that Fat Tony is a widower. His wife's name was Anna Maria, and she was quote-unquote whacked by natural causes. I really like this detail about his personal life, as we had never seen Fat Tony around with a wife or mistress or anything up to this point. It's always been Fat Tony and his crew. The only inconsistency this creates is in the pretzel episode, when Fat Tony tells Marge about his wife always getting on his case about the money. So she probably died somewhere between seasons 8 and 18. I'm guessing Homer accidentally got her killed by a t-shirt gun, which was the style at the time. Fat Tony's final appearance is technically in season 22's Donnie Fatso. As you can probably guess from the title, this is obviously one giant parody of the film Donnie Brasco, with Homer working undercover for the FBI. Fat Tony gets the majority of the best scenes in this one. I really like the accidental prank call to Moe's that he does, and then how they give he and Homer quiet personal moments together to bond. we get to see the gravestone of his deceased wife. In the end, Fat Tony dies of a heart attack when he discovers that Homer has betrayed him. It's kinda shocking seeing him killed off so suddenly, and from a heart attack of all things. You would expect a more violent end for a character like this one. Now, I don't think this is a great episode or anything, more on that soon, but I appreciate that they at least gave the original Fat Tony a dignified exit. It's definitely one of his more humanizing episodes. The story concludes with Homer being kidnapped by Fat Tony's cousin from San Diego, Fit Tony. Okay, fine, whatever, if you must do this joke. Fit Tony was going to kill Homer, but then lets him off the hook because of memories or some contrived reason. He then takes over the Springfield mob. The stress of the job causes him to overeat, transforming him into Fit Fat Tony, and eventually just Fat Tony. Coincidentally, the show also changed its name to Fit Fat Simpsons due to how it so consistently manages to have its cake and eat it. This is where the video ends if we're just talking about the history of this guy as a person. But the show continued to treat the new Fat Tony almost exactly like the old one, like nothing happened, because The Simpsons. So for the sake of completion, and so we don't have to do another video on this guy, we'll hit up some of the new Fat Tony appearances. Later in that same season, he marries Selma Bouvier in the episode The Real Housewives of Fat Tony. He gets told off at the DMV, kidnaps her, and is about to murder her. Then he decides that he likes her moxie and gets her liposuction. Okay. They get married and the whole thing turns into this awful Jersey Shore parody. In the end, it's revealed that Fat Tony was already married and that Selma Bouvier is just his Gumar. The original Fat Tony was a widower, but I guess this new version of him was already married. Huh. This episode is pretty lousy, let's just be honest here, but somehow they still got the continuity to work. It's interesting though, when I looked at the history of Edna Krabappel, her story ended in a marriage followed by her death. Fat Tony somehow managed to do it the opposite way, dying first and then getting married. Let's just say season 22 is weird. Honestly, the later Fat Tony episodes are a bit all over the place. Just look at season 25's What to Expect When Bart's Expecting. Everyone in town thinks that Bart has a special power to get people pregnant, via some kind of voodoo magic. Fat Tony kidnaps Bart and Homer to get him to breed his racehorse with a stud. But it turns out the male horse is gay, and scandalous horse sex happens with a Duff Beer Clydesdale instead. No, I did not make up this episode. I can assure you it is real. Then there's this season 23 episode where Fat Tony makes his accountant the temporary Don while he's stuck on jury duty. We get a couple nice moments of the dumb, mundane stuff that Fat Tony deals with, and a pretty solid parody of the christening scene from The Godfather. We also get season 29's Whistler's Father, where Marge does interior decorating for a building that turns out to be a bordello. Hey, there's Michael again. Probably the best Fat Tony episode in the modern era is season 28's 22 for 30. It's basically an ESPN 30 for 30 parody with interviews, one of those format-bending affairs. Fat Tony starts up a racket with Bart to shave points off of basketball games, because Bart is mad at Homer or something. Lisa discovers at the conclusion that Fat Tony was humiliated as a child playing basketball on a girls' team, and eventually gets him to back off. Also, Louie reveals that Fat Tony cried during Toy Story 2, which, as he puts it, isn't even the sad one. Okay, he has a point there. Maybe. There's a part of me that wishes Joe Mantegna was more of a regular in the series, and we got more than 1 or 2 episodes a season with Fat Tony. But at the same time, I think he's a good example of how to keep a secondary character somewhat fresh. How to keep the show from burning itself out so quickly. There are only so many Mafia jokes in a row that we're gonna put up with. He's kinda like Phil Hartman, in that it becomes a treat when he does appear. Even as sparingly as they've used Fat Tony, they still repeated jokes and references on occasion. I mean, there are 2 completely separate episodes about Homer ratting out Fat Tony's crew. I don't think his modern appearances have been particularly great, even if the continuity is somehow rock solid. However, it's understandable why they keep going back to these guys. They really are great about raising the stakes of a story and adding some conflict. And most importantly, they manage to hit that sweet spot of silliness and relatability that you want in a comedy. Fat Tony is a terrible, terrible person, but somehow I still like him. Go figure. Maybe I'm just being fooled as badly as Chief Wiggum. I think it's more of a testament to the careful balancing act performed by the writers for so many years. Fat Tony is a villain we can all get behind. I've probably squealed on the Springfield Mafia long enough, and I'm getting quite nervous, so maybe I should stop right here. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Fat Tony moments are, and be sure to nominate a new character for the next video. Maybe someone less threatening next time. As always, thanks for watching.